My name's Walter Hacker, and I'm a senior in civil engineering.
I'm Aaron Palmer. I'm a sophomore, construction engineering and management.
My name is Bill Werfitz. I'm a junior in civil engineering. Today we'll be talking about personal protective equipment, otherwise known as PPE, the history behind it, and the future that PPE holds for the construction industry. Before we get started, I am going to go over the table of contents for this presentation. This includes what is PPE, the purpose of PPE, the history of PPE, and the overall characterization of PPE as you go from the head to the toe on a person's body. We'll also go over the costs associated with PPE and go over a case study on the hard hat. At the end, we will discuss what the future does hold for PPE and how that will affect the construction industry for years to come. So what exactly is PPE? It is an acronym for Personal Protective Equipment, and it plays a major role in construction site safety. It's also a general term for safety attire and props to prevent injury and death on site. It is an ever-evolving aspect of construction, and it ensures adequate safety standards while on site. PPE has multiple purposes when it comes to the safety of workers both on the work site and around the work site. OSHA stated back in 2018 that PPE is equipment worn to minimize exposure to hazards that cause serious workplace injuries and illnesses. It is meant to keep workers safe in unideal conditions such as biohazards, unsafe physical hazards, and chemical hazards. It's also a mental tool where workers are better prepared for risks while on the job site. At the same time, it allows workers to feel more comfortable while working and ensure that they are safe at all times. PPE has a vast history. It all started in 1970 when the Occupational Safety and Health Act was passed. This was the beginning of OSHA, and it assured safe and healthful working conditions for men and women while on the job site. Equipment development has progressed over the years, and it also includes the integration of comfortable materials and efficient designs. PPE has brought multiple other elements into the construction industry, such as toe protection and midsection protection.
The first and arguably most important area of the body to be protected is the head. Throughout the industry, the most common head protection comes in the form of a hard hat. OSHA requires the hard hat to be worn when there is any danger of head trauma resulting from falling objects, collisions with fixed objects, or contact with electrical hazards. Other stipulations are that the hard hat must cover the entire head. Today's design has a suspension system underneath the outer shell that allows for some absorption of blows to the head, and some even have non-conductive properties. Finally, all hard hats need to be routinely inspected and replaced if there are any signs of damage. To dive further into the hard hat, we will explore a case study on the history and evolution of it. The first helmet was discovered from a 17th century BC grave circle, and it was known as the boar's tusk helmet. It was most likely used for warriors, which were the only users of helmets until 1919, when Edward Dickinson Bullard had his mining employees use helmets. The hard hat found its way into the heavy civil construction industry in 1931, when 6 companies incorporated mandated hard hat use on the Hoover Dam project. It has come a long way from the leather and ivory material of the boar's tusk helmet to the pure metal of the 1800s and to the suspension system and non-conductive properties we see today. Hearing is another PPE consideration in heavy civil construction. OSHA mandates the use of earplugs whenever noisy construction practices are taking place, and it is not feasible to stop them. The earplugs are expandable foam, which is simply placed in your ear and the foam expands to fill up the remaining cavity, and simple cotton or paper is inadequate. Following hearing protection is sight protection. In construction, there are lots of activities like welding, cutting, grinding, and more that stir up lots of debris that can cause severe damage to the eye. That's why safety glasses are required, and they need to have a high hardness in order to avoid cracks from flying debris. They must also be durable, comfortable, and easily disinfected. In addition to causing sight damage, the cutting and welding activities, such as concrete cutting, can also cause respiratory damage. In certain scenarios where the laborer can't avoid contact with harmful or toxic chemicals in the air, a respirator must be worn. It works by filtering out the toxic air to prevent inhalation.
One of the most overlooked parts of PPE is fall protection. OSHA standard from section 1926 part 104 says lifelines must be strapped above operation to a structural member capable of withstanding 5,400 pounds. A safety belt lanyard shall have a maximum length to prevent falls of more than 6 feet. In that same section, Part 105 says safety nets must be provided where operation takes place over 25 feet above ground or water level, or where ladders or other fall protection are impractical. Now let's take a closer look at the extremities. Gloves and boots are two common things worn on a construction site. Gloves should be heavy-duty rubber gloves when working on concrete to avoid the moisture in the concrete. Insulated gloves and sleeves when working on electrical equipment is very important to avoid shock. When wearing boots, they should be slip-resistant and puncture-resistant soles. Safety-toed boots should be worn to protect against any falling heavy equipment. People used to wear steel-toe boots, but they find that composite-toe boots are more comfortable and more practical. The most important piece of equipment on a construction site, aside from the hard hat, is a safety vest. It should be worn at all times to make you easily visible on a construction site. The other thing to protect your midsection is a full-body harness is commonly used when working off the ground. The height standard is set by OSHA for different heights of every situation. 6 feet off the ground is the most common height where a harness is required. There are some costs we have to take into account when looking at PPE. There's a cost versus risk that the contractor has to consider. The contractor has to determine the line of risk versus cost to the owner, and the contractor has to pay for the equipment that the people are wearing. It's significantly less money compared to the possible hospital bills that had equipment not been provided. The contractor also has to provide training, which takes time out of the workday to educate the workers on the PPE use. This creates non-productive hours, meaning the contractor is losing money. The contractor has to take into consideration that protecting their workers is much more important than these non-productive hours. Now let's look at the future of PPE. Safety shoe prototypes from Etlin are a new thing in the industry. They are glow-in-the-dark to be more visible in low-light situations so that you're always visible on a construction site. As Walter said earlier, the hard hat is continuing to evolve. 3M has created a new hard hat that is a two-way radio which enables hands-free communication in high levels of noise. Workers are now able to communicate while never having to remove their hearing protection and removing their hard hat. This encourages them to wear their hard hat on the construction site and keep them safer.
And these are our references. And once again, we thank you for listening to our presentation, and we hope you found some value in the personal protective equipment you see in construction today.